For a moment, it felt like nothing could move. The world was frozen, and Riverpaw stared at Ava. The she-cat had somehow pushed herself up on her front paws and was staring down into the void below, her mouth gaping open with the last echoes of a desperate howl still escaping. Riverpaw was briefly transported back to the city, to the night she killed her sister. She had looked into the crowd and found Cloud's blue eyes wide and mouth hanging open. If he had been able to make a sound, it would have been a scream similar to Ava's, a cry they both seemed to hope was strong enough to bring back their sibling. Then Ashheart nudged Riverpaw, and his dark amber eyes brought her back to the present. We have to get back to the others. Riverpaw's muscles ached, but she nodded numbly and straightened herself with a few painful grunts. She and her mentor approached Ava slowly, half expecting a fight from the grieving she-cat, but they were met with no resistance. Ava was limp as they wiggled her onto their backs. Slowly, they ascended foothold by foothold toward higher ground. As soon as the three obtained a clear view of the path and their comrades, Riverpaw saw exactly what had happened. All creatures had frozen in place, staring at the cliff's edge with darkened eyes. Of the three wolves, only one was still standing on the path now, a dark ginger with bright golden eyes, muzzle black with blood, and legs shaking. Vilcus. Riverpaw felt Ava stir, the she-cat slowly lifting her head to look. The sight of her one remaining brother made the she-cat's eyes gleam with pain. Farkas. Her voice was soft and quiet, the only time she sounded so utterly like a cat. No, almost like a kitten, helpless and small. The she-cat made no attempt to leave the two Thunder Clan cats until they had rejoined the other cats. Only then did she slide off and half limp, half drag herself over to Vilcus, who stood silently beside the cliff. Riverpaw remained with the others, watching the siblings from a distance. Vilcus. Her meows shifted into growls as she snarled at her brother in the wolf tongue. Her tone was no less laden with grief, and Vilcus slowly turned toward her. He let out one solitary growl, and Ava abruptly fell silent. She looked at the ledge, looked at her brother, and slowly backed away, shaking her head. Riverpaw watched the exchange with a lump building in her throat. Farkas had. He gave his life for us. Featherfall's quiet meow sounded from Riverpaw's right. The she-cat had padded forward along with the others. Stoneteller, Rowan Shadow, Gingerpelt, Thunder, Wolfclaw, Featherfall, Lightning, and Ashheart all bowed their heads, recognizing the sacrifice before them. As Riverpaw watched the others, she could see the scrapes and scratches from the rock slide, but she could also see many more serious injuries. Bite marks and slashing cuts ran across the cat's legs and pelts. It was clear they had done their best to slow the alpha down, but fighting a wolf had not been a feat they had been ready for, even with all their many days of preparation. Riverpaw bowed her head with the others. The gathered creatures kept their moment of silence until a rapid scuffle sounded down the path. Stoneteller pricked his ears and turned to the cats. The pack may be coming. Quickly, hide in the rocks. Riverpaw moved to follow her clanmates, but paused to look at Ava. To her surprise, the wild she-cat was steadily limping back toward the cats. Riverpaw opened her mouth, then closed it. Can I even say anything to her right now? I hide. With you. Ava's voice cracked on every word. None of the cats protested. However, some gave her confused looks. So Ava, the tribe, and the clan cats took to the rocks, peeking out from the shadows and keeping as quiet as they could. As they watched Vilcus sit calmly on the mountain path, a few long moments passed, and the pack appeared with barks and growls of surprise. Slowly, Vilcus stood and padded toward the wolves, stopping only fox lengths away. He let out a sharp bark, and the pack seemed to let out a collective gasp, their eyes wide and ears pressed to their heads. A few whined and shifted uneasily. Vilcus continued to speak, and Riverpaw could guess that he was explaining what had happened. After a couple minutes, a few of the other wolves stepped forward, muzzles scrunched and snarls. Vilcus responded with a snarl of his own, and the atmosphere quickly plummeted. The cats tensed, wondering what would become of the friendly wolf who had helped them. After all, he stood alone now, faced with far too many enemies. The snarling continued until a white wolf let out a bark and stepped forward. The others seemed to back down immediately, allowing the snowy-furred wolf to face Vilcus directly. Riverpaw had watched this all carefully, but finally she leaned toward Ava. "Who is that?" "Kiba," Ava responded, voice quiet and hollow. "Spirit leader. Decide for Pack in Alpha's place." Riverpaw turned back to the wolves to find that the white wolf, Kiba, had begun to approach Vilcus. With a snarl, the spirit leader lunged, grasping Vilcus by the throat. Riverpaw suppressed a yell of astonishment and anger, knowing that she could not make a move and alert the wolves to her clanmate's presence. Still, she watched in tense apprehension as Kiba and Vilcus fought, rolling along the path with teeth bared and limbs flailing. After exchanging blows and bites, the two finally separated, and Kiba straightened. Vilcus straightened as well, meeting the wolf's eyes with his own before bowing his head. The white wolf turned to the pack and let out a deep and ringing howl. The other wolves joined, all but Vilcus, who stood with his head high. As the howl subsided, each wolf came forward and bowed, nipping Vilcus under his chin. The last to do so was Kiba, which seemed to complete the ceremony. From what Riverpaw could see, Vilcus had just officially been appointed this pack's new alpha. The dark ginger wolf turned once more to the cliff, but he did not look down. Instead, he threw his head back and looked at the deep blue sky, moon shining brightly, but clouds drifting in from the west. Vilcus let out a howl that resonated with sorrow. The pack joined his howl, and the ThunderClan apprentice felt Ava shake beside her. Riverpaw only glanced at the dark cat, and found that her eyes were brimming with tears, and her expression was twisted with grief. But not a single tear fell to the ground. The she-cat simply shook and dug her claws between the pebbles. When the howl ended, the pack left, following Vilcus as he led the way back down the path and out of sight. The cats waited until they were sure the wolves had gone, then slipped from their hiding places. Ava was the first to leave, padding quietly out and dragging herself up to the edge of the cliff. There she sat and stared at the sky, as though looking for any remnants of the morning howl in her brother's life. Stoneteller was the first to break the silence, as he turned to the cats, his expression grave and eyes heavy. "It is done,"